Well, happy birthday to the Philadelphia Phillies. Today, 142 years ago, the Philadelphia Phillies played their first professional game against the Providence Grays, a 4-3 loss in what was a prerequisite for a lot of Phillies losses over the years. And while the Phillies have become the losingest team in American professional sports over the last 142 years, there have been some bright spots. So I thought it would be fun on the birthday of the team to take a look back over the first 100 years of the four teams that made the World Series in that first 100-year span and get an idea just how good they were compared to some of the teams of recent note. So let's take a look back over the last 100 years and start with the 1915 Philadelphia Phillies. And before we do that, hello everybody and welcome into the PHLY Phillies podcast. Tyler Zulli here. Let's start with the 1915 Phillies. After 22 years and only one season of 90 wins or more, the Phillies found themselves in the World Series for the first time in 1915. Let's go back to the beginning of the season, though, as the team finished 90-62 and won the National League pennant for the first time in its franchise's history, primarily on the back of the strength of their pitching staff. The Phillies finished with the best team ERA in baseball in 1915, a 2.17 team ERA. Do you understand how ridiculous that is? Now, granted, it's way less pitchers and guys threw way more innings and had more appearances, but a 2.17 team ERA in the 1915 season was the best across Major League Baseball. And it wasn't particularly close. They also posted the best whip and had the fourth most strikeouts in the league. Now, this is the funny part. They were fourth in strikeouts with 652. It's crazy to see how different the game was over 100 years ago because the Rockies last season finished last in Major League Baseball as a team with 1,118 strikeouts. And the Phillies were best in Major League Baseball, or fourth best in Major League Baseball, with 652. Now, the rotation, as it does happen most times, teams have a good rotation that go to the World Series, and this one was no different. They were headlined by their ace, Grover Cleveland Alexander. He started 42 games that season and appeared in 49 in total. His 376 innings pitched ranked still to this day within the top 25 of innings pitched since the turn of the 1900s and into the new century, and it wasn't even the most innings that he thrown in a single season. He twice had gone over the 380 mark in his professional career. He was 31-10 with a 1.22 ERA, and he led the National League in strikeouts with 241. He was also the leader in the National League in whip, hits per nine, strikeouts per nine, and strikeout to walk ratio. But the rest of the staff was just as good. There was not a single pitcher on the 1915 team that had worse than a 3.42 ERA. Now let's get to the World Series. They ran into a Boston Red Sox team that had won 101 games that season out of the American League, and the Phillies end up falling in this series in 5 games after winning game 1 of the series. That's a common theme that you may see more frequently as the Phillies World Series trips go on. They lost 3 games in this series by a 2-1 score, and the deciding Game 5 by 5-4 score. So every single game in this series for the Phillies in which they lost by 1 run. So the 1915 Phillies end their season with a 4-1 defeat in the World Series at the hands of the Boston Red Sox. The Phillies followed up the 1915 season with a 91-win season in 1916, but it was not good enough to win the National League. That is when disaster kind of hit for the Phillies once again. They went from 1917 to 1931 without a winning season, and then again from 33 to 49 without a season above 500. That's when the Whiz Kids came in. The 1950 Phillies, a beloved team in Phillies lore, especially for an older generation that had not gotten to experience much winning over those previous decades. As we said, multiple decade stretches without a winning team. So the Whiz Kids were a team that a lot of the older generation holds in their hearts dearly, and for good reason. They won the National League that year, and quite frankly, they were a little bit lucky to get to the World Series because their 91 wins, while it was good enough to win the National League, would have ranked 5th in the American League if they were in the other league. The Yankees, the Tigers, the Red Sox, and Cleveland all finished with better records than the Phillies. Now, the Phillies were led by their 23 and 25-year-old all-star outfield studs in Richie Ashburn and Del Ennis. They were both incredible that year. Both guys hit over 300. Ennis led the National League in RBI with 126 and ended up finishing 4th in the MVP voting that season. Richie Ashburn, of course, as we know, was the catalyst for that team. He led the National League in triples with 14, but it was a pretty deep lineup past those two stars. It featured Granny Hamner at short and Dick Sisler in the outfield as well. It was an excellent 1950 outfield for the Phillies. And of course, as the trend continues, the Phillies had an ace of their own in Robin Roberts. He was that dude for the Phils. He made 39 starts that year, which was the most in the National League. He won 20 games. He went 20-11 with a 3.02 ERA. He was just as solid as they come, start in and start out, and took the ball in super crucial spots for the Phillies throughout the 1950 season. But the Phillies did also have the MVP of the year. It was a rare year in which a reliever won the MVP. Jim Constanti won the MVP that year, and he actually won the award over future Hall of Famer Stan Musial, who hit nearly 350 and had an OPS over 1. How it happened, don't know, but Constanti wins the 1950 MVP. He was retroactively credited with 22 saves because saves were not a stat until the late 1960s, but as historians have done, they've gone back and looked at his numbers and his box scores. He would have had 22 saves that season. He also made a then record 74 appearances for the Phillies in 1950, posting a 2.66 ERA and winning 16 games. Now, the Phillies season, much like the 1950 year, ended in a World Series loss. They ran into an absolute buzzsaw of a 1950 New York Yankees team that featured 4 Hall of Famers on their roster. The Yankees swept out the Phils, but much like in 1915, there were a lot of close games. There were 3 one-run games in the first 3 games before the deciding Game 4 was lost 5-2. So the Phillies now 0-2 in their first 2 World Series trips. Let's flash forward 30 years. You got to go another stretch of 3 decades with a little bit more success, but no World Series appearances. The Phillies had a handful of winning seasons or near 500 seasons in the remaining decade of the 1950s, but they were never able to recapture that Whiz Kids 1950 magic. The decades to follow featured some bad baseball and an epic collapse in the 1964 season, and then again some more bad baseball in the rest of the 1960s before the 1970s, which could have been considered the most consistent and successful decade for the Phils up to that point. Perhaps the best teams in Phillies history were the 1976 and 1977 team. They each won 101 games, but both of those seasons ended in the NLCS that year, losing to the Cincinnati Reds in 76 and the LA Dodgers in 77. But then came the 1980 World Series team, and it could have been considered a last-ditch effort for that core. Past success was not kind to the Phillies in the postseason, as we laid out 4 consecutive postseason trips without a World Series appearance, and that's when 1980 happened. After firing Danny Ozark the year prior, the Phillies turned to Dallas Green to run the team full-time in the 1980 season, and as we all know, Green got the most of his guys, winning 91 games and securing the National League East crown. This is the team that you know: Schmidt, Boa, Lazinski, Maddox, Rose, Carlton. Of course, it's a team that you know pretty well. We all hold in reverence and high regard, and rightfully so. The team won both the Cy Young and the MVP that season, with Steve Carlton winning an NL Best 24 games and striking out 284 batters. And Mike Schmidt took home the MVP as he hit 48 home runs, drove in 121, and had a +1 OPS on the season. Schmidt led the National League in 8 statistical categories and was the leader in WAR that year as well. And this is the team that finally put the Phillies over the top. After 97 seasons, your Phillies were world champions of the 1980 season. After taking down the Astros in what some have considered maybe the greatest postseason series of all time, where 4 of the 5 games went into extra innings, the Phillies ended up winning the World Series in 6 over the Kansas City Royals to claim the franchise's first ever title 97 years into existence. Now, the final team over the first 100-year stretch to make it to the World Series is the 1983 Phillies. Just 3 years after winning the title, the Phils were back in the World Series in 1983, and while it was a very similar core, it was an aging core that was looking for one final crack before it was kind of time to wrap things up with the team that they had on hand. In 1983, the Phillies won 90 games and would not have won any of the other 3 divisions in Major League Baseball. So being in the National League East paid dividends for the Phillies that year as they were able to get to the NLCS, and that is when they were able to get back to the World Series. So let's take a step back for just a moment. Mike Schmidt posted another 40 home run season, but the rest of the offense wasn't nearly as good as it was 3 years prior in 1980. That year, they hit 249 in 1983 compared to the 270 as a team they hit the year they won the World Series. Lefty was good, but not quite as good and not as effective as his 1980 self. He did go on to win 16 games, but it was actually another pitcher who ended up being featured as the NL Cy Young Award winner for the Phillies that year. John Denny was excellent, a 2.3 ERA and a 19-6 record. Easily his best season of his professional career. He wins the Cy Young, the second Cy Young winner for the Phillies in 4 seasons. The Phillies got by the Dodgers in 4 games where Steve Carlton was vintage lefty. He posted a .66 ERA over 2 starts in the NLCS and ended up winning 2 of the 4 games. But after winning Game 1 of the 1983 World Series, the Phillies then dropped 4 straight to the Baltimore Orioles and hit just 195 as a team, losing the 1983 World Series, dropping their World Series record to 1-3. Now, listen, this would have been an extensively long video if we had gone through the rest of the teams that have been in the World Series. But if you liked what you heard, if you liked this little foray back through the history of the Phillies over the first 100 years, thinking about the World Series teams, I would love to drop a part 2 for you. So if you like this video, drop a comment down below and let us know if you want to see a part 2. We'll talk about the 93 team. We'll talk about the 08 and 09 team. And of course, the 2022 Phillies, the most recent team that went to the World Series. So if you liked what you saw so far today, of course, please leave a like and a comment down below and leave that comment saying, yes, I want to see a part 2. This was fun. It was a nice little walk down memory lane. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on the PHLY Phillies podcast.